all for joining us for a special overview and scrutiny meeting looking at the Council's Regen programme. Can I welcome everyone back from their summer? I think it's probably been a different type of August for most people. We've not managed, I'm sure many people haven't managed to get away as they normally would, but thank you for joining us. At present this meeting are members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, co-opter members and a representative of the Harrow Youth Parliament. Also presenting to us will be the portfolio holder for Regeneration, Deputy Leader of the Council, Count Keith Ferry, and officers from across the Council representing Regeneration, Legal, Finance and others. We also have representatives from the Council's legal advisors and others who may come in and we may ask them questions where it may be helpful. Can I ask members of the committee, with the exception of co-opter members and Harrow Youth Parliament, you should have your videos on at all time, but your microphones on mute unless you are speaking. Other members and participants should have their videos switched off and microphones on mute unless they're invited to speak. If there's a technical problem, we will adjourn. We do have a quorum for this meeting. Can I also note that alongside the papers published for this report were a large number of Part 2 papers. Because of the highly confidential nature of the papers, the Part 2 papers have not unfortunately been distributed to co-op members of the Harrow Youth Parliament, essentially non-councillor members of this committee, and that was a decision by the Chief Officer having looked into the confidentiality of the papers. So when we are, can I remind people that when we're in Part 1, they should not refer to anything in Part 2, or at least try and phrase things in a way so we don't need to go in Part 2. There will be a Part 2 session towards the end. For those of us that have taken up the opportunity to look at the bid documents, you will know the names of bidder A and bidder B. Can I remind you, however, that is still confidential, and for the duration of this report, for this meeting, and preferably for the Part 2, you should only refer to them as bidder A and bidder B. So I think that's all my announcements. Declarations of interest. There has been a publication under supplementary declaration of interest published today. Is there anyone that has anything over and above what has been published today?
Chairman.
Chris.
Thank you. I requested to attend the meeting at quite short notice, so I wasn't listed in the document, but I just confirm for the record that I have no interest to declare pecuniary or non-pecuniary.
Okay. I don't.
Sorry, Councillor Shah, it's Daksha Kilani. Just checking, there are no reserve members in attendance.
Sorry, I've missed. Yes, I've missed the spot. Are there any reserve members on the committee? No, I can't see any. We've got the declaration notice and Chris. Can I also point out Chris and Richard Almond have requested to be part of the meeting. They may speak. They're not members of the committee, so I need confirmation from the committee that that you are happy for them to speak in the meeting. Are there any dissenters to that? No. Okay, we will take that as agreed. So I'll move on to item 3, Harrow Strategic Development Partnership, appointment of preferred bidder. Says in the document set out. I have sent around to committee members, co-op members, Harrow Youth Parliament, a list of topics and the order in which we want to cover them. This is just to allow for ease of free flow, and there is a catch-all towards the end before we might move in Part 2. So can I ask if people try and ask questions around that areas? I have set aside times for each one. I'm not going to be entirely rigid on that. I will be flexible. I'm not going to cut anyone off mid-sentence just because we've come to the time. But the times are there to allow us to keep moving, as this meeting might be a long one. In terms of contributing, as normal, you can use the hand up button, use the chat room, chat options, and if all else fails, unmute yourself and just make it clear that you want to speak. I am trying to monitor everything, but it might be difficult. So with all of that, I'm going to ask Councillor Keith Ferry to introduce the report. Keith, if you can keep your remarks to less than 5 minutes, that'd be great.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. The whole purpose of tonight's discussion is to appoint a preferred bidder to partner with us in achieving our regeneration aims on 3 key sites. The first one of which would be the new Civic Centre, based on the Peel Road car park site. The second is Byron Quarter, which is based near the leisure centre, and the third is Poets Corner, which is the present Civic Centre site. We've been talking about these development sites for some time now, probably in the terms of about 3 or 4 years. And this is the end of a very long process in appointing a partner, but also the beginning of a very long process in constructing these homes for people with affordable housing. I'd just like to make 2 points, really. I'm sure that most members of the committee are already aware of most of the reasons for having a preferred partner, but during the procurement process, and under council and government procurement rules, members of the council, that is councillors, were not involved in the procurement process, but key members of the cabinet and other key members of the executive were given briefings on the progress that had been achieved in the procurement process almost on a weekly basis, but we weren't invited in to do any of the deliberations which have resulted in a preferred bidder. And I think that's just about it. Apart from emphasising that really what we're doing this evening is to just produce a preferred, or what we were doing at the cabinet meeting on Thursday week, is to appoint a preferred bidder. Once that bidder has been appointed, then we will have a lot of work to do in order to form the partnership, and the end result of that, I hope, will be a cabinet report in February, when the partnership and its governance procedures and an outline of how we see these sites being developed will be presented to cabinet. So at the present moment, we just wish to appoint a preferred bidder within the next couple of weeks, and then we do an awful lot of work in sitting down with the preferred bidder and sorting out the governance. But I'm sure that will come up in the first of your topics which you've got in the agenda. So thank you very much for the chance to address you, and I look forward to be able to answer any questions that may be asked.
Thank you, Keith. Before I open up to questions, I just want to check whether Paul Walker or Julian have anything to add to that.
No, thank you, Chair, and I think Councillor Ferry's summed up where we are and the purpose of the report, and we've got a full list of questions to respond to from yourself tonight. So I think we should get on, Chair.
Great, and I see Julian nodding to that as well. So yes, I'm going to kick us open for questions. So the first section for about half an hour, governance, legal and accountability, an important part of a joint venture, that we get the governance, legal and accountability right. And I think it's absolutely right that we start with. Is there anyone that wants to ask a question on that point?
Sorry, Sachin, can I ask the first question?
Yes, you can, Candy.
Yes, I think in one of our interactions with the officers, we were told that the limited liability partnership is the best vehicle as a joint venture, a legal entity to take this forward. And could officers explain to us why this is the best option in terms of the legal framework of the joint venture, to say why is that the best option for us and no other sort of legal entity type?
Great. To start with, who wants to take that?
Session, do you want us to answer each in turn, or do you want to take 2 or 3 questions together?
No, I think as this one's probably quite an important one, we'll take this one.
Okay, I think I'll ask Julian if he could begin with that, given his experience and the model that the council was looking for.
Yeah, I mean, happy to do that, Paul. I think it's a good occasion also to bring Scott Morrison from Pinsent Masons in first. But if I start, it's worth just recapping that the LLP gives you the opportunity to have a jointly owned vehicle. It allows you to operate on a 50-50 basis, and it is the most tax efficient basis on which you can operate. And that's probably a good start to bring Scott in.
Scott, you are from, if you want to introduce yourself and your position within the project team.
Yes, of course. So my name's Scott Morrison. I'm a partner at Pinsent Masons. We're the external legal advisors to the council in relation to this project. So in relation to the corporate vehicle, it is necessary to have a corporate vehicle for this type of structure. And the precedent over the last 10 or so years amongst local authorities that have set up this type of vehicle have been to use limited liability partnerships. It's a very flexible corporate structure which gives you corporate protection in terms of ring-fenced liability. It's very flexible in terms of governance. We can prescribe the governance structure that we want that suits the council. And as Julian said, from a tax perspective, it's tax transparent, which has certain benefits for a local authority.
Hi,
Great.
Scott. Sorry. I'll check this with the chair. Are we in a position to check this tax, the efficiency for tax in this part of the meeting with that section 2? Because I really want to know, when you say it's tax efficient, I really would like to know what it means by being tax efficient, and what are the consequences, and how has that been factored into the bid workings for the financials to call it cost neutral?
Yeah, I think we can take that now. Yeah, so if you want to take that point now.
But perhaps if I start and then pass over to Julian. So the benefit of a limited liability partnership is its tax status. So you'll be familiar with a company in that a company itself is taxed in its own right. So a company would pay corporation tax on its profits in accordance with the relevant corporation tax threshold. The difference between a limited liability partnership is that the statute and the setup of it by government enabled the partners to be taxed in their own right rather than the corporate entity. So what I mean by that is that the partners' receipts, the profits that partners receive in their hands, so to speak, they are taxed. Now, in the context of a local authority, as a local authority does not pay capital taxes, such as corporation tax, that means that an element of those will be untaxed effectively. So therefore, there is a lawful opportunity to create a benefit through this structure for local authorities.
And just to add to that, Chair, if I may, so I think where Councillor Abiada is going is, has this been taken account finally into the proposals of the bid submission, to which, of course, as I think I said last time, the answer is as yet, of course, no, because we don't have a final version of the business plan. That business plan will then receive at the end of your process a tax audit to make sure that everything is flowing depending on what the schemes are and depending on what subsidiary vehicles, if any, are established to deal with the various sites, and so you will receive a flow through at that time. But in terms of the submission as it stands, because, as Scott says, it is transparent, the effect is effectively neutral. I don't know if Ishdeep wants to add anything to that.
Ishdeep?
Hi, evening all. Ishdeep Bauer, Everson Young, the Council's financial and commercial advisors. No, I don't actually have anything further to add. As you say, the impact from the procurement perspective is nil, so the returns that have been proposed wouldn't be taxed, and therefore there would be no further impact. I'm sorry, Chair.
I mean, just got a clarification.
Okay, if it's quick.
It is quick. So between the three of you, so I understood both sides, that it's not going to be taxed and it's going to be taxed. So can someone clarify which one it is? Is it going to be taxed and at which rate? And secondly, Julian, I'll just double check with you. So there's a tax due diligence exercise after this point. Is that correct? So that's two questions I would like clarified.
Which did you want to take first?
Is there any tax or isn't there any tax and at what rate on the profits?
Shall I take that, Julian?
Yeah.
So there are different levels of taxation. There are SDLT, the vehicle will be subject to SDLT, or the partners, as the case may be, in the context of property transfer. VAT, the vehicle will be subject to VAT. But in the context of taxation of profits, the vehicle itself will not be taxed. The partners will be taxed on their receipts. So if, as the partner, bidder B is a corporate entity, that will be taxed under the UK corporation tax rules. But as the council does not pay corporation tax, then it will fall within the council's regime.
And to take the second question, I think understand it. No, there is no tax due diligence exercise at this point, because you do not have a final business plan and you do not have the final setup of the structures as to how each site will be developed. The tax advice, which will be required, the tax due diligence, as you phrase it, that will be done at the end of the process before the matter comes back to you and then to Cabinet for final sign-up. And that will ensure that the various vehicles and various site transfers are working most effectively, not only to deal with the issue that Scott is talking about, but also that we are not doubly incurring any of the other taxes. And so that is almost the last thing we do when we get to the point of coming to sign up based on the business plan.
Thank you. I'm bringing Stephen in now.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you everyone for coming today. In terms of governance, I understand that it's envisioned that the partnership will be governed by a board where you have a number of appointees from each partner. I gather 3 appointees from each partner. How would the Harrow representatives to the partnership board be selected, and how would they then be accountable for their decisions?
So I think that's probably one for me, Paul, if you're happy with that. I mean, the selection of those board members is a matter for the council, which, as I understand it, and in-house lawyers can correct me if your approach is different from what is done elsewhere, that will effectively be the selection, no doubt, of the leader and the cabinet, you, I believe, ratify it at a full council at the appropriate time, which, in the context, if members are minded to agree this report, would no doubt probably be in November or December, in time to set up a shadow board before the company is established in the new year. But I mean, the nominations are in the council's gift. I don't think it is necessary for me to prejudge what, but I'm fairly confident the direction of travel will be that there will be members on that board.
And then, thank you very much. And then, so if whoever's on that board, whichever member is on that board, they then make a decision that affects the course of how the partnership develops, like, you know, what might be put on a particular piece of land or something, and therefore what profits might be derived from that, or whatever it is they decide. How can the council then hold those people, those members, accountable for whatever decision they might make within that board that then affects the council.
Okay, so the first duty is obviously they have a duty to act on behalf of the local limited liability partnership, although it is not identical, and Scott would no doubt tell you the differences, but those duties are very much akin to those of a company, and it is the same predominant duty, which your members owe when they are appointed to other companies. How you would hold them personally to account? Well, clearly you would always have the option as a council to remove them if you so chose at some point in time. But of course, that would be a matter for the council at the appropriate time. Perhaps the wider question, if I may, Councillor, is as to how the partnership will be held to account. Well, of course, the partnership, half owned by the council, will have, first of all, certain decisions that will have to be referred back to the council to be taken. So, for example, the agreement of the initial and subsequent business plans is a decision for the council as a member of the partnership, not as the council as the board. So there are a number of things in which the council will hold the partnership to account in that respect. Secondly, of course, you yourselves as Scrutiny will hold the partnership to account on a regular basis, no doubt. It will be a matter for you as to how frequently that is, but they will be expecting to report to you to be held to account. So the company itself will be reporting to the council. The council is 50% shareholder. Sorry, go on.
Thank you. And what sort of decisions would be expected to be delegated to the partnership board, and what sort of decision would be expected to be reserved back to the council as one partner and the developer as another partner?
Well, for example, I mean, the very first one on the list is the approval and adoption of each business plan is a decision for the members, the partners as members. The alteration of the objectives or the nature and scope of that business, or indeed closing down, is a decision for the members as partners. And taking action outside the parameters of those business plans is also a matter that the members would need to approve. So, for example, if you were to have a major divergence, say in the what was going to be done on a particular site, or a particular change to the level of affordable housing provided, that would be a decision, if it was outside the business plan, that would need to come back to the members. If you want to form a subsidiary of the partnership, then that would require the council and the partners' approval if it's not set out. If you were to admit any new members to the partnership, say, for example, if there was a funder or something of those nature that you wanted to admit at some point, then that would be a decision for the partners as members. So it's those pretty critical, fundamental decisions. Scott, did you want to add anything?
Yes, just to add to that, there are also a layer of decisions that the council would take in relation to individual sites or phases that are transferred into the vehicle. So, for example, before phases or sites can be transferred in, a series of conditions have to be satisfied, and the council will be party to those decisions as well.
Thank you. And just finally as well, would the partnership be subject to freedom of information?
So the answer to that, I think we may have mentioned it before. The partnership itself, as I understand it, is not subject to freedom of information because it is an independent entity, but clearly where the partnership communicates with the council, if document and information is coming back and forth between the two, then those would obviously become subject to the freedom of information. The monitoring officer and I discussed this, and he didn't contradict me, so I believe that to be the case.
Okay, Thank you.
Before I know, I can see Sarah's got a hand up, but before we go to Sarah, just I want to bring Keith in. The one of the answers to the questions we just had was in terms of the membership of the board. The answer was it would be down for the leader and the cabinet. So Keith, as representative of the administration, can you just talk about how that decision will be made?
Well, we don't know yet, because that's one of the things that we will have to discuss when we're talking to our partner. Because essentially the board will be running the partnership, and therefore it's for the council and for the preferred bidder to decide exactly what the composition of and number of the board will be. But I mean, I would imagine that it could consist of a member. It can also consist of an officer, and preferably the third person would be an independent person who would be appointed after advertisement. But those things haven't really been gone into in any great detail. It may be that the partner would have an idea that he would want more than 4 representatives, or he may want less than 3 representatives. So that's the sort of thing that has to be discussed. But there is we've already gone into who the member would be. And because of conflict of interest, it would not be a member of the cabinet, because the cabinet would be the body which is instructing the partnership, and therefore to have a cabinet member also as a director of the LLP could possibly be a conflict of interest. But these things will be gone into in much greater detail when we've got a partner that we can sit down and talk to.
Great, thank you. Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to ask a few broader questions around accountability and councillor involvement. It's just a good point, Chair. Is that okay? Yeah,
perfect.
So it's just a few questions really around the process and councillor involvement beyond the partnership to ensure accountability. So, for example, how frequently would there be opportunities for councillors to hold the partnership to account? What kind of training and support there'd be for councillors in order for them to be developing a good understanding of what's happening at each stage, and who would be providing that training and support? And then finally, just what can and couldn't be done in terms of accountability, in terms of that involvement. What are the limits of what councillors beyond the partnership are able to have a say in? There's a few there. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, who wants to take that?
Shall I have first go?
Right, you did?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So in terms of the frequency of holding to account, I mean, I think the short answer, Councillor Butterworth, is that's really a matter for yourselves. I mean, in the report, you'll notice that it was drafted that made reference to maybe a typical annual scrutiny. Clearly, there'll be reports to Cabinet and other places more often. But I mean, it is clearly feasible that if you want to see them in scrutiny more often, you can do. I mean, I think my only caution to you would be that clearly, you know, there is a job to be done. They do need to get onto it at some point, and reporting all the time may not be the best use of their time. But ultimately, you can hold them to account as often as you choose. It's also worth just mentioning, of course, that the partnership will have its own audit regime and will appoint auditors. But of course, insofar as the council's investments in it, both in terms of land and resources, then of course, you know, that is then subject to the council's own audit regulations and audit committees, etc. So there's a number of routes to this. In terms of training for councillors, I'm not sure from your question whether you meant councillors on, for example, scrutiny, but in terms of that, I mean, clearly one of the tools of the training and information will be careful explanation by the officers who are responsible for monitoring the work of the partnership in due course. There's no doubt at all that this will be a new concept, and it is, as you can tell from the first report, quite a complicated concept. And certainly we should take every opportunity through your usual training mechanisms to increase knowledge in that. As far as the board members are concerned, I mean, we haven't sat down, clearly we haven't got a partner to sit down with as yet, but I mean, my recommendation to you would be that board members should have some additional training, particularly in the development economics of this, particularly in how the limited liability partnership works, so that whoever those board members are operating, you know, on a level playing field with their counterparts from the private sector partner. It's also fair to say that as a board they should do some joint training together, and they should work on together on how they're going to go forward for the future. I'm not quite sure how best to answer the question about the limits of accountability. I mean, I think the way I would say it is this: if you, in terms of an individual councillor, then you would have the same mechanisms as you would have in terms of anybody to which you appointed somebody else, and in essence, that the issue there is to take them off it. I think if you felt that the board was not doing what you wanted it to do, then within the legal documents there are a range of mechanisms. Obviously, you would be able to, you know, have encourage straightforward negotiations. You would be able to escalate it through the senior officers and obviously through senior members. Ultimately, and it does make the point in the report. Ultimately, of course, you don't actually have to agree your business plan if the business plan was going off kilter. You know, you could stop it happening if you absolutely had to. I'm not sure that I would be sat here recommending that to you, because I'd hope that it could be sorted along the way. But you know, ultimately, you could you could stop your vehicle and pull it down, for want of a better word. But I mean, I am talking here into what I might call Armageddon scenarios. These are things that I wouldn't want to encourage you to take in the first instance. But so ultimately, there is no limit. You could stop it.
Thanks very much for that. I think I am particularly interested in that training aspect, because I think there are some parts that are extremely complex, and if we want all councillors across the board to kind of have a full understanding and feel that they can kind of be part and understand the process, and I think that's going to be really important for us moving forward. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And I think that is an important point, and one of the areas that we might want to do as a scrutiny committee. We're very lucky to have the council's external advisors here in the meeting, but maybe at some point towards the future, if the council's budget would stretch, a private meeting with members of external panel, giving us as a committee a bit of training on types of questions we should be asking, and how we can scrutinise effectively. Hopefully the regen budget will stretch that way. Paul, so you got your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, happy to explore that. I think it's in our gift how we want to develop the overview and scrutiny role with regards to the new HSDP limited liability partnership, and whatever training development we can access to help members, you know, we can scrutinise better, ask more pointed questions to help the understanding that the committee needs, but also to ensure that the direction of the partnership, the strategy that's been adopted, is in line with what our original ambitions were. I think all those things can only help, and I think there's a good opportunity in setting out the governance proposals and members' involvement, and how we support training development in that particular proposal. So yes, happy to support that, and we can make that work as we are doing this evening.
Fantastic. In terms of this area of governance, legal and accountability, I don't see anyone's hand up. Is there anyone? Paul, you've got your hand up. I think that might be an error. Yes. If you can't put your hand up or use a chat and you want to say something, if you can unmute yourself now. Jean, yeah, I'll bring Jean in.
Thank you. Just a little bit more. Thank you, Sarah, for raising the issue around member development, because Sue Anderson and I are, if you like, responsible for enabling a process around member development I think it would be very useful if we're going to go down this route, if we actually take the initiative from what you've said and work with everyone on setting up not just one, but a series of programs so people can actually scrutinise as they go, if you like. But in addition, hopefully input some really helpful stuff too. So I will take that back to Sue as well, as I'm sure you will. Thank you.
Fantastic. I'm going to move us on to an area that is linked strongly with governance, legal and accountability, and that's financial matters. I did decide to split this out just because I thought there may be a number of questions on that area. I suspect we may come back to it in the part 2 areas, but in terms of part 1 questions, can I throw the floor open for any questions? I see that Dawn has joined us. That's always good. Stephen.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've got a few questions, so I hope you'll indulge me as far as possible.
Absolutely.
Firstly, it's mentioned in the papers, that the part 1 papers, particularly that in addition to putting land into the partnership, the council is also putting cash into the partnership, and I don't think that was particularly clear when we had the briefings in an early stage. I'm just wondering why the council needs to additionally put cash into the partnership when it's already putting in a significant amount of land.
Right, Julian or Dawn?
I think that's probably best to bring Ishdeep in.
Ishdeep, okay, even better.
Hi all. No, thank you for your question, Stephen. So if you think about how a development would typically be funded, and if we maybe do it through a worked example, it'd probably be easier. But imagine you've got £100 of spend, and in order to get some development debt, typically you may achieve a loan to cost ratio of 60%. So you know that £60 of that can be achieved through getting senior development finance. That leaves an equity contribution for each of the partners of 40, so 20 each. If we calculate that through the business planning process that the council's land is worth only 10, your partner would be putting in 20, and in order to kind of balance the equity position up, the council then would be required to put an additional 10 of cash in that example. So the reason why you may need to put in additional cash is to keep that equity participation equal in order to be able to get the senior debt finance, in my example, of 60%.
Thank you very much for that. I also noted the very helpfully that the finances are split up into the 2 streams, with stream 1 being the amount that the council is putting in, and then stream 2 being the cost of the new civic. And I can see that there's sort of detailed workings of how the 23 million of extra funding that the council will be putting in on top of the land, how that will be recouped. But it's not clear how and over what time frame the 16 million of land investment would be recouped. So I'm just wondering what details there are of that.
Dawn, do you want to start?
Yes. Dawn, could you pick that up, please?
Yeah, I think the land drawdown, and Ishti might have to help me out a little bit on this, but the land drawdown of the estimated value of the land will come down at the agreed periods during the development over that 5 years, isn't it, Ishti?
Yeah, so effectively, every time a land parcel is drawn down, that is the council's part equity investment within the HSDP, and when the build out of that development has happened and receipts are received through the ultimate sales, then obviously the land will be repaid to the council. So a simple answer is it's in a phased manner. And I'm sure that Julian, Dawn and co would be able to share that information if it hasn't already been shared.
Yeah, we do actually have that in some of the detailed appendix, but we can bring that out and make that clearer to you.
I mean, I don't want to get into part 2 now too much, but all I will say is that and we can probably pick this up further in part 2, but I saw in part 2 there was a table of how the cash input was going to be recouped, but there wasn't anything about how the land input was going to be recouped in the same way over what time frame. So it will be useful if we can. Obviously, I don't want to cause you to talk about part 2 matters here, but it'd be useful to pick that up in part 2.
I think, sorry, Stephen, cut across you. I think I can legitimately say, without breaching the local government regulations, that it comes back in phases, and it comes back over a period from 2022 to 2031, and the chunks vary depending on what happens on the ground. I mean, of course, it is worth just reminding ourselves that the final business plan in February may look a little bit different, but based on where we are at the moment, that's what happens.
I think, Julian, if I may just add one further to that. Obviously, Stephen, you mentioned that there's a cash repayment table within that part 2 report. Effectively, the land is a higher priority than your equity repayment anyway, so you could probably say that the land elements of the land are being paid at a very similar time to the table that you refer in terms of cash.
Right. I mean, it's just that it wasn't explicitly put there in the same way that the cash recouping was put there. When we get to part 2, I can point out the page that I'm referring to, but obviously I can't at the moment. But if I can just move on to my next question, which is just wanted to talk about the cost neutrality aspects of it, and I just wanted to get a confirmation really as to what costs are being included when you talk about cost neutral, and specifically if we end up, once we have the new civic centre, of some civic staff being housed in the depot in the new part of the depot that was supposed to be for the commercial, that was supposed to be let out commercially, and therefore we have an income foregone from that. Would those costs be included in the cost in the council's understanding of cost neutrality? Because obviously that is a cost to the council.
Do you want me to answer that, Julian?
Yeah, I think so.
I think cost neutrality, the definition of the cost neutrality is one that we put in place for the procurement process. I think we've mentioned in previous meetings that the costs that are included in the cost neutrality calculation, it's a construction cost and a cost of fit out to a certain level category in A and B. So that's what is included in that. What is not in that, and that is purely as part of a cost neutrality calculation as part of the procurement process. What is not included in that cost will be sort of the removal cost, decant costs, as part of that particular exercise. If we decide to incur costs associated with other council sites, so you've mentioned Forward Drive, that is not as part of the cost neutrality calculation. That neutrality calculation is purely for the procurement purposes for the preferred bidder.
Yes, I mean, I understand that from the procurement point of view, but obviously from the council's point of view, that will still be a cost that the council will have incurred in order to house civic functions. And an observer looking in, a resident or some other observer might look at that and say that's a hidden cost. And really, because the whole object of cost neutrality is to provide the council with a new civic centre at no additional cost. And obviously, I appreciate it's not very much to do with the bidder, but from our point of view, from the council's point of view, it will still be a cost that the council will have incurred, and therefore the civic centre won't have been or won't have been provided without additional cost. So how would we be able to overcome that? You know, how would you, what would you say to somebody that might think that was a hidden cost?
Julian, Paul, do you want me to answer that? I think everybody will have their own view about what a cost is for cost neutrality. I think all I can do is re-emphasise that the cost neutrality was put in place purely as a measure as part of the procurement process. So when bidders put their bids in per a defined comment about cost neutrality, we could measure whether bidders met those requirements. If we have to spend money on other sites around the borough for various reasons, be it because of COVID, etc., then they are excluded from that cost neutrality calculation. We have to keep them separate. So that's really, that's really all I can explain to you, because they are very, very separate. We can't start bringing in to a cost neutrality calculation about a specific procurement question any other costs that the council incurs on sites across the borough for whatever reason.
And Dawn, would it be fair to say that cost neutrality was a pass and fail element at each stage in the procurement process based on that definition?
Yes, that's a good point, Paul. It was a pass or fail question on a very specific measure of cost neutrality as detailed in the contract and the specification documents.
Just before we move on, Stephen, I just on that point, I think I know this issue of cost neutrality has been well trodden. We've discussed it a number of times. Just to clarify, I think in other answers, Dawn, you've been very clear that if it wasn't for COVID, the council would be housing all of its staff in the new civic centre as provided. The only reason the council is looking elsewhere is because of COVID. Is that right?
No, I don't think it's purely related to COVID. I think I'm not sorry. Can you repeat your question, Sasha? I'm not quite.
Essentially, the question we've got is the question on cost neutrality, and the reason why there's always concern about it is that one of the concerns is that what we've done is we've built a civic centre that's too small in order to meet cost neutrality, and therefore the council's using other places to house its staff as a way of getting around the cost neutrality. However, when we discussed this separately, you assured me that that isn't the case. The civic centre that is being built under cost neutrality is sufficient for what the council is looking for. The only reason the council is looking for other measures is that social distancing and so on and so forth has made it hard, has just essentially changed what the council needs.
Sorry, Sashin. Yes, the specification for the civic centre is detailed in the specification documents, and there explains that it can vary up or down. Is based on what the council needs, and yes, we have had to look at other sites because of the challenges of meeting COVID requirements.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair. Could I just add to that? I mean, I think there's two aspects to this. It's perhaps just important to separate them out. Of course, the exact final size of your civic centre will be determined by you later in the autumn when you agree your accommodation strategy. But it is certainly true, as Dawn says, that based on the submission sizes, the building would be more than capable of accommodating all the council's staff. And indeed, that was true pre-COVID and before we moved to more mobile working. The point about COVID is that we may look to go to other alternative accommodation in the short term, the depot obviously being in consideration, but still in terms of the reports before you, we are still talking today about the same size building as in the specification that Dawn refers to. Now that may change, but it will not change because you can't put people in. It's more than capable at the moment of doing that.
Okay, I'm Steve, I can see that Keith wants to come in, so I suspect it's on this point. So I will bring Keith in. I know that Chris and Candy are both waiting as well, so I'll bring Keith in.
Yeah, just on the point of the forward drive depot, when we did the business case for putting extra floors on the depot, it was on the basis that all of those extra floors would be let out at a commercial rent. So if part of that depot were to be used for the council's purposes, alluding to the idea that we might have a smaller new civic centre, then the commercial case for the building that we're building at the moment at the depot would be completely wrong, because it wouldn't have any income.
Okay, right. You may have created a whole lot of questions with that.
That sort of that kind of contradicted the answers that have come previously, because if that's the case, then if it's the case that we do end up using the depot or part of the commercial development in the depot for civic functions, then that is a cost that we wouldn't have otherwise had.
I mean, I do want to move us on from cost neutrality. So I know Ishti wants to come in, so I'm going to bring him in, but I want to move us on from cost neutrality.
I just wanted to quickly address this point around the additional costs in terms of using a different building, because effectively, if you are built, so in the current size of the civic, as we've said, it can fit all council staff as required. So that's a certain size and that's a certain cost. If you decide for other operational reasons that you will build a smaller civic and utilise other accommodation, obviously the cost of actually building your civic is also coming down because you are building a smaller one. So there's a question of what, does the cost reduction in terms of build offset the additional costs of utilising another building? So I don't think it's completely black and white, and I think that would be part of the accommodation strategy and the work that's being undertaken by council officers.
Great. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Chris in. Sorry, Stephen, we'll come back to you if you've got more questions, but I want to bring Chris, then Candy. Chris. We lost Chris.
Yeah, hang on. Right, thank you very much, Sachin. Most of the questions Stephen's asked very well, especially about forward drive. One of the questions I wanted to ask is, we always talk about cost neutrality. Why don't we talk about cost profitability to make a profit out of this deal at the end of it? We're talking about, oh, we'll just get this done and we'll end up not costing us anything. Why don't we make a profit out of it? Then we can pay some of our bloody great debts off. Sorry, simple question, but answer it, please.
Yeah, and I think, Dawn, do you want to pick that up in terms of the commercial opportunity at the new civic? You're on mute, Dawn.
Sorry, I think it's worth understanding that as part of the bids that we've received, we are getting, for the land that we're putting in and some equity on top, which some investment on top, which the paper clearly shows can be paid back from the investment. We are getting a new civic centre, new civic provision, we are getting affordable housing, and we are getting a level of redeveloped housing. So I think it's quite hard to talk about not getting any profit out of the deal when we are getting all that provision, and as the current model shows at the minute, that the council, there is no impact on the general fund at the moment. Now, we've talked about this, this will have to be reviewed as we go towards if we go towards the business case. But for example, if we dropped one of those elements out, then there will be an opportunity for more return to the council. But we have to bear in mind what we are asking for to be provided as part of this, as part of the procurement process we went out for.
Thanks, Dawn.
Okay. Ishti.
And just to add to that, I think, yes, on top of all the things that Dawn has set out, even after that, there is a surplus that is being generated over the life of the HSDP. So I think there is certainly a massive focus on cost neutrality, because that was a key strategic objective when the council set out on this course. But on top of achieving cost neutrality, delivering the affordable housing, delivering the Harrow New Civic, the council is making a financial return on top of that.
Great. Chris, did you have any other questions?
No, it's answered in the way. I do understand that. I do have some queries, possibly later when we talk about the partnership and how can I put it? Retention of the land and ownership of the land and returns on the land at a later stage. But that I would say come in part 2 because it'll be financial figures.
Okay, great. Canty.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got questions around the documents we saw for the bidding process, and they're twofold. So the first part is
can I just remind you we are in part 1, so just be careful in how you phrase your questions.
Correct. Yes. No, I'm absolutely clear. So I'm not going to let any other information to be disclosed in my questioning. So I just wanted to understand, because there were variances in terms of the cost base and the return and so on and so forth. I just want to know from officers, like, what work you've done, because there's a huge disparity between the base cost of the bidders. So it's understanding, you know, what could cause that. Yes, I understand the fact that, yes, you could have different base costs, but just what work is, or what quality controls are in place to make sure that, you know, there is no disparity in quality, or, you know, any other sort of way that your base cost is different. And in the same line, you know, is that being compensated for by having a higher management fee and higher interest cost assumed?
Chair, if I may, I do think we are at least on the verge of verging into part 2. Can I suggest we do take this down the line?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, no problem. Okay, I've got a second and different question then. We can tackle that later. In terms of both bidders, because was there any updated due diligence done? Because some of the documentation was, well, you know, understandably from a while back. Any new due diligence done on any of the bidders, or both bidders rather, recently?
Who wants to
tell? I believe that we talked about this previously, and we continue to monitor the company position of your bidders. We continue to monitor the market and what is happening outside, and we continue to take soundings from our advisors, Avison Young. And certainly at this point in time, I mean, I'll ask Ishdeep or Kim if they want to add anything, but certainly at this point in time, as I've said previously, we believe these to be solid and reputable bidders. Obviously, there's no guarantees in this world, but there's no cause for alarm on either of these bidders at this present time. Ishdeep?
No, nothing further to add. Absolutely, you know, we continue to monitor the situation. And Scott, correct me if I'm wrong. I think as part of the procurement process at the earliest pre-qualification stage, if there is a material change in their financial positions, etc., that would have excluded them from the process earlier on. They are at an obligation to inform the council anyway. But Scott, please do correct me if I have got that incorrect.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Right, sorry. Can I follow that up, please, Chair?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, I understand that, you know, you would. That's the least we expect from you to say, you know, you're keeping an eye. Could you please confirm what form of formalization is? So, I mean, it's fair enough just to keep an eye. Is there any sort of reports or documentation flowing between the advisors and the council team at all in terms of what's happening in the markets at the moment, and why you're able to say that nothing's changed? Because a lot of things are changing. You know, there is no company that's safe at the moment in terms of the current environment, and the credit ratings have changed, the market conditions have changed. So what is it that you've exactly done to satisfy everyone to say, you know, yes, you're on top of this and you're most current on this review?
So I think there's a couple of things worth picking out on this, and I think I can probably navigate that without getting into part 2 stuff. I mean, the first thing to say is, yes, the world has changed. We all know that. But one of the reasons why we need to, why we're recommending to you that we appoint a preferred bidder is that so that you have a ready-made development partner with whom you can discuss what is going on and to what extent that has changed. It is certainly the case that ongoing and eternal vigilance is required because things can happen. I'm not sure, Councillor, that I share your view that I wouldn't necessarily put it that no company is safe, because I did say a moment ago there are no guarantees, but we can be certain that there are no warning signs in the markets in terms of following their reports, etc. You may have in mind high-profile failures of other companies. It's worth reminding ourselves that, of course, those had been signposted and tracked for some considerable time before they actually happened. Clearly, as we go through the business planning process and we look at what is actually proposed, what is happening in the market will be a significant consideration to take into account, and clearly how the bidders response to the market. Specifically at this point in time, we continue to monitor the company's information and the creditworthiness, and we continue to track and seek advice from our advisors on the matter. But we certainly don't at this point in time expend large amounts of money on specific reports, which frankly would be of little benefit at this point in time. We can say, as I said a bit ago, that these companies are well capitalised and as yes, no guarantees, but strong companies. Ishdeep, I realise I'm taking your thunder. Do you want to add anything further?
No, I mean, I think that's a fair response. In terms of the original pre-qualification due diligence that we did set quite a high benchmark in terms of that financial strength that companies had to pass. And both the bidder A and bidder B were comfortably exceeding those thresholds that we set out, and therefore, we have that level of confidence that it would have taken a significant drop for them to fall foul of that. As I've said, obviously there is an obligation for them to inform us if those mandatory requirements have now not been met. But more widely, in terms of your question around what due diligence do we do, we are very close to the market. We understand which schemes have stalled, which schemes are continuing, and we know both of these bidders, bidder A and B, have continued with minimal disruption, relatively speaking, in terms of in the construction development market. And they are, they haven't. So while we can't look at their accounts and say, yes, all the pennies are accounted for, we know that they are continuing to drive other developments that they are involved in, and they have not taken as big a hit.
Sorry, can I just a simple question? I haven't heard from any of you. When was the last time you checked anything? I understand the due diligence process. When was the last time there's a formal document saying you actually looked at these companies? Recently, because your documents were in the middle of 2019, that's 1 year ago. All the documents we came across recently.
Who wants to take that?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure I understand the question, because I don't know the reference to the documents of 2019.
Okay, sorry, Julian, if I might just interject there. So those documents we saw from the bidders, obviously, the references I'm getting in those documents refer to July 2019 and so on and so forth. So my understanding is you got these bids a while back and so many things have changed. As someone sitting on this committee, all I want to know is that, when's the most recent, because the world's different now. When's the last time we checked anything? Because it's not just about market capitalization, it's also about the level of debt and, the risk rating and so many other factors. You experts, all we want is some assurance to say, this is going ahead, we are not turning back. So the least you would have done is saying, when's the last time you checked, you did any sort of, basic due diligence on the bidders recently? Have you got a date?
So I believe that the position I've described is one of ongoing monitoring. I would have to double check when we last actually took a company's house check. But I mean, what I'm explaining to you and what Ishdeep is explaining to you is that we continue to monitor this on a regular basis.
And if I may add one.
Sorry, Chair. I mean, I am slightly concerned because if you are telling me Companies House, Julian, no disrespect to anyone, Companies House reports sometimes every 9 months. That's just not good enough, isn't it? I think we need to be more proactive on this, seriously.
Thank you. I think what Julian said is he'll write to us, he'll get more information exactly.
All right, okay. That's fair then, thank you.
And we'll take that. I'm going to bring in Stephen now.
Thank you very much, Tim, for coming back to me. I did just want to follow up on the point that Councillor Moat made, because I too was wondering why, obviously for all the talk about cost neutrality, why that seems to be the extent of our ambitions financially for the civic centre, when if you think about it, when the current civic centre is on a massive or a large footprint and it's moving to a much smaller footprint, freeing up all that land for development. And an observer might look at this and think, why should we not expect to be making a profit, which can then, go into help to fund our services and, potentially, bring down the council tax or whatever? Why are we not expecting to make a profit? And, somebody might think, isn't this the worst land deal in history if we can't make a profit from this kind of arrangement? So why do we not think, why do we not think we can make any sort of substantial profit from that sort of deal?
Gillian, I think.
Yeah, I think the starting point is, as Dawn did, to remind you what you are getting out of this deal. You are getting a new civic centre, public realm, affordable housing, and, as the model shows, additional returns beyond that. So I think the first starting point to say is that, well, actually you are. If you are saying, why are we not making a rental return out of your civic centre? Well, I think I would say two things to you. First of all, your original purpose of your civic centre was to accommodate staff, but I think as to whether you want to devote any of that building to specific commercial objectives, that is a matter for your debate at the second stage. So you have the option to try and do some out of that, but I don't think you should walk away, as Dawn carefully explained earlier, that you're getting out of this a significant range of benefits, including an additional return at the end of the process.
I mean, I would question the premise of that, because we're consolidating our civic centre into a smaller footprint, we're consolidating our civic centre, we're making it smaller. Yes, we're getting a new building out of it, but we had a civic centre to start with. We're going to have a civic centre now. I don't see why that should be considered as a gain in itself. We haven't gained anything. We in terms of the net position. I appreciate that it looks like that on if you're looking at it on a balance sheet, but in terms of what your average resident in existing resident in Harrow, we're looking at that and thinking what is in it for local residents. What are they gaining out of this? I would find it very difficult to answer that question, because we're not, we're just making our civic centre smaller, and we're calling that a profit. I think
Stephen.
Yeah.
Sorry, your point's been made. I can see Kimberly from Avison Young wants to comment, so I want to bring Kimberly in to answer the point.
I think she's gone, Sashin.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, sorry, I'm here now. Just really to pick up further to what Dawn and Julian had said on this, but the cost neutrality point was a pass-fail requirement for bidders. That is not a sort of mark of you've done a great job. That is a minimum benchmark for getting through a procurement process, and I think it's quite important to draw attention to the council objectives. which were clearly framed within the information memorandum that focus on a key one being optimising value from the council from your existing and new assets, and delivering wider economic and social benefits for local residents. And I think the key there is when we talked about, you know, how are you going to check whether or not the JV has done what and the LLP is doing what it's supposed to be doing, it will be get held to account in accordance with how it achieves those objectives. And I think the other point to just flag is quite clearly it would not be in the interests of anybody involved in that LLP to not be seeking to, you know, maximise returns from those particular assets, because it's a 50-50 return position. So if your absolute sort of maximum is just to get cost neutrality, then you're clearly, you know, not commercially driving the opportunities in the vehicle. So I think those were the points I just wanted to flag.
Chair, might I just have a very brief comeback to Stephen's point? I think, if I may, Stephen, you were actually narrowing down what I said and saying that the civic centre on its own was the profit centre. I think what I was encouraging you to do was to think in the round and to take all the benefits into account, because yes, I accept that the civic centre is smaller, but it still has to be paid for. But then, as a result of the use, and Kim's words, maximising your existing assets, you are also building both, well, not both, but you are building market for sale, private rented and affordable housing on Poets Corner, and they are giving you the public realm and the affordable housing and a return. And you are getting a minimum, based on this submission, of 40% affordable housing. All of that has to be paid for. So I'm encouraging you, I think, to take it in the round rather than individually.
I mean, sorry, could I just come back on that? Normally you expect to make a return on housing. You don't normally include housing as part of your profit. You don't include housing as what you're getting. If you're a developer developing a piece of land and you're building housing on it and you're then selling that housing, or you're allocating some of that for affordable housing, you wouldn't say that housing is your profit. You would say that whatever you gain from that housing.
I mean, I'm gonna move us on and take Chris on this. Chris, and then I do want to move on.
Yeah, this is a quick question about it, because if you talk about London Mayor, he wants 50% affordable housing. We're budgeting all our stuff around 40% affordable housing. What happens if we're forced to go into 50%? That's going to change the whole balance of the whole figures. And can I also ask at the question, how do you put what? I've never found anyone can answer me this. What is affordable housing to the average person? How is it based? Because every time I see affordable housing, it's out of most people's pocket lines.
Well, you very helpfully take us right into the next topic. So thank you, Chris. That's very helpful. So who's going to answer that point?
I mean, if that's Julian, is a well-practiced line around the definition of affordable housing.
Yes, right, Julian.
Yeah, well, indeed. I mean, I think, I do take the point that there are any number of definitions of affordable housing, but in the context of your schemes and your approach, the housing that is going to be for affordable rent is to be let at the London affordable rent, and it's very clear that's the measure that's being adopted in your instance. I believe I've said in other fora, the next stage of discussions indeed is with the GLA to discuss the opportunities for funding and assistance as to whether they can help move up to the 50%, and there will, as ever in these things, be a negotiation and discussion as to where that finally settles. And again, one of the benefits of having a preferred partner, preferred bidder, will be that you can help and collectively engage with the GLA on that. I mean, yes, if you were forced to go to 50% without any assistance, it would alter the balance of that. There's no question. But that, of course, gives me the opportunity to just have a little final word on Stephen's point, which is that you're quite right. Of course, the affordable housing is a cost to your development, but your objectives were to maximise affordable housing, and therefore that is part of your return. If the council had set different objectives in maximising its return, then you would be looking to provide less. So it undoubtedly has to be considered within the envelope.
Good. Great. I'm glad you managed to get that response because I cut you off. I think the question of affordable is incredibly important. We've used the word forced to go to 50. I think it's very sad for us to be talking about forced. This is something we should be willing to go to. So I mean, affordable housing, Harrow is desperately short affordable rented accommodation. London affordable rent is very good affordable rent. It is absolutely affordable to those on housing benefit and others. So it is a very good rate, and we're trying to maximise that. I think that's really good. But I would like to understand why the council thinks the minimum that we expect of the private sector should be what we are doing.
Okay, Ishti, do you want to come in on that, or would you like me to start?
I wasn't actually clear of the question, so I'm happy for you to start, and then I'm happy to fill in.
The question, I'll just repeat the bit of my statement that was a question, and that was that 40% is what we expect the private sector to provide in terms of affordable housing. Do we not expect ourselves to be held to a higher standard? And why do we think it's acceptable to only put in what we think is the bare minimum that the private sector should do?
Okay, so I'll have first go while Ishti marshals any additional comments. I mean, the way I see that, Councillor Shah, is that you have the complexity here of also the other things that you are seeking. You know, you are seeking a civic centre and you're seeking public realm. And in terms of getting a holistic offer, then inevitably there are some trade-offs. I mean, I think the maths is probably self-evident that if you were not doing one, you could do more of the other. And I think the balance is where he gets to. We did say, of course, or you said, because actually it was before my involvement, but you did say in the objectives, the council said that you wanted to maximise affordable housing. I think you might well get to 50% with GLA help. Nonetheless, I think given all the complexities and all the things that you are looking for as a council, I don't think it's a bad effort. But let Ishti add to me.
Very, very difficult to add more to that, Julian, except reiterating what you have said. I mean, in the end, affordable housing, it is a cost. It's, you know, it doesn't make money for the scheme, and alongside all of the other asks that, you know, in terms of the civic, the cost neutrality that the council set out at the beginning to achieve. You can only kind of, you know, set what is, you know, we've set from a procurement perspective what the minimum policy requirements are for private sector developers in Harrow. Now, as a JV partner, should the numbers allow, cost neutrality allow, it is at your gift as a partner to push for greater affordable housing, as a public sector partner liaising with the GLA, and to drive forward for future further affordable housing. All of this is at your gift. It's part of the business planning process. As we said, the numbers are what they are right now. They may improve, they may go down, but you have the ability as a partner to try and push that agenda forward, as that is one of your objectives for the HSDP.
And I certainly hope that's what Cabinet will be doing. I can see Jean and then Chris, and I know Sarah wanted to come in on community involvement. So Jean.
Thanks very much, Sachin, and thank you very much for the erudition so far. It's extremely helpful with the delving that we're doing. I sort of want to make a more broad brush question around community engagement, and it's not quite community engagement, what is it? but it's much more around community engagement. What is it we're doing here? Because I'm reading something from the strategic statement around community engagement with communities, businesses, residents and families. I wasn't aware families were different from residents, but there you go. But in that sense, how have we found out what people would like? Are we creating something that then we think the businesses will like and then communities will like, or have we, which I hope we have, really gone out to the groups, which groups, who, what sort of input have we had to get this sort of vision that we need? Guess that might be Paul.
I mean, I don't know whether Keith wants to come in to talk about the original work that was done consulting local communities based on the original scheme, and then I think Julie can talk about what each of the partners is suggesting by way of ongoing consultation.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll bring Keith in.
Yes, we've consulted with the community as such 4 times on Byron Quarter, and each time we've taken into their comments into account, changed the layouts and the mix of units. I think that we've probably done the same on Poets Corner. I know there's been at least 3 public consultations. There's been one consultation which was held by the council on the new civic centre, and of course that went through the planning process, so there was a statutory consultation on that. And we've had for the last 4 or 5 years, we've had a regen residence panel, which I think has met now 26 times.
How many?
26 times.
Sorry, how many people are, sorry to interrupt you, how many people are on the residence panel?
There's about 15.
15, thank you.
So we've asked the community what they expect to see, and what they expect these developments to be like. And once we've got the revised designs, we will then go into another series of community involvement. I would think at least 2 on each side, plus the statutory consultation that we have to have during the planning process.
Can I just say, Keith, thank you for that. Can I just say I was aware of some of that, but this makes assumptions that the people who are being consulted are people who are already there. Then, if we're looking at other affordable housing and things like that, be people who are in need who haven't been consulted at all, so we don't know what the needs are.
Sorry, I wasn't quite certain.
So
which where were you referring to?
Sorry?
Sorry, Jean, you broke up a little bit through that. Do you want to say that again?
Sorry, I've taken my microphone off because it was annoying me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. No, I understand all that, but if other people are going to benefit on what we have to offer, surely the consultation should extend beyond the immediate, if you like, captive community into other areas, different families, different groups, businesses, etc. And I'm wondering whether we've limited our consultation with communities rather than saying, okay, it's a bigger offer. What do other people within Harrow and beyond? Okay.
Well, we've also got a consultation website, and we've got Building a Better Harrow website, which has got a consultation portal on there, and we've had a few thousand hits on that already over the last 4 years.
How many?
So,
sorry.
I think we nearly got up to 2,000 so far.
Okay. But in the same way, if I say this, Julian obviously wants to say something. It's then people putting themselves forward rather than us as a council actually focusing or opening it up to very specific groups, you know, different communities, different backgrounds, faiths, etc. It just seems to me a bit of a narrow consultation. So Julian, you probably had something to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. I was just going to.
It's narrow at all because the 15 people on the regen panel have not just volunteered; they've been chosen because they represent a particular community,
right,
or a particular user, or they're representing an organisation which we feel that should be consulted. So,
okay,
you know, we want to make sure first of all that we capture the views of everybody, and not necessarily the numbers, but we want the number of different proposals or views or changes. If 100 people tell us that they want the doors painted white, then that's the same as one person saying they want the doors painted white because of a particular reason. What we want to do is to get as many different and varied ideas of what people want to see out of these projects as possible.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what I'm asking. I'm just asking how we've done that. Sorry, Julian, did you have something to that?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you'll have seen from the report that one of the questions on which bidders were required to make submissions was about community and stakeholder engagement. And just by way of example, I think the submission for which I'm looking at, which is actually the proposed preferred bidders submission, illustrates, I think, the point you're making. They were asked to identify relevant stakeholders, and of course they will no doubt be only too happy to add to those, and then a range of mechanisms by which they would engage with those. And I don't propose at this point to read them all, but they include public exhibitions, social media, website updates, consulting the borough's young people, meeting the developer events, local business briefings. So a range of things that I think will go to meet the concerns that you're raising. So it would be a wide-ranging consultation. I suppose the other thing just to say, of course, is that in terms of the things like the mix of housing, then of course that is informed by the council's housing needs survey and housing strategy. So there's obviously a light in there. And then in terms of the private market housing, then again, obviously in terms of size and scale and family homes, etc., then the same is to some extent true. But of course, what is designed and what sells in the market is something that they would research anyway. So I think both by what they've done already and more particularly by what they're committing to do going forward, then there's a significant amount of work in that.
So we're saying, if I can just clarify, sorry, Sachin, if I can just clarify, please. We're saying that this range of mechanisms that you've just cited hasn't been undertaken yet. Once we have the preferred bidder assigned, if you like, then they will follow through on something more in depth?
Absolutely right.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Chris, and then, oh, sorry, I think Kimberly wants to come in on this point, I think.
Yes, it was just really just to follow up on Julian's point that, it's not that practical to have had 3 different bidders all trying to consult with different groups as part of this process. It's not particularly helpful, given clearly only one of those bidders is going to be selected. So that's really why there has been quite a significant void, I suppose, in that consultation period whilst we've been going through the procurement. I think sorry.
Sorry, that's not the point I was making. It was really us and our responsibility as a council and as councillors that we'd reached out to a certain extent to know what we're looking for. I'm not suggesting all 3 bidders or however many there were should actually go through the process. I'm just trying to make sure the process has started and continues to build, favouring community engagement, which I mean, we're all very keen to make that happen, aren't we, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. There was a specific question in the procurement purely on this point, and it was also in the planning response as well. So it's certainly an area that's been a key focus with all of the bidders, and those commitments will translate through into the business plan, which will be binding.
Yeah. Thank you, Kimberly. Session.
Great. I got Chris, then Sarah, then Canty.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to make it clear what I said before. I don't care if we're forced, I'll say in brackets, into 60% social housing. The more social housing, the better it is for this borough. What I actually meant was it will throw our financial figures out as those get bigger and bigger financial, unless we get the help to balance those figures out from the Greater London Assembly. So what I'm hoping is more, not less, but how skewed will our financial figures be for each percentage we go across?
Brilliant. I'm hoping when we say maximise affordability, we meant 100%. So hopefully we'll get to that. Sarah.
Me too.
Thank you. I think really Jean's covered much of what I wanted to ask. I was particularly interested in the reflexive and ongoing consultation that would be taking place with community and stakeholders as that kind of evolves, but also what types of things might community and stakeholders be given the chance to have a say in, and what things are beyond their remit. I think it's really important in terms when we're consulting with community and stakeholders that they understand what there is ownership to change and what can't change. So I suppose how can we make that clear as well to community and stakeholders?
Yeah, I mean, I think that making it clear is a good point in the context of the design of those events and mechanisms that will come forward, and I think that's well worth us taking away and going forward with. I mean, within reason, there isn't much that can't be consulted and engaged upon. I mean, I think you know, hopefully the policy on these sites is such that you know, you wouldn't be looking hopefully for the community to say we don't want anything on these sites, because obviously that would be quite a drastic effect on the project. But certainly, you know, mixes, locations, designs, all those sorts of things should be you know, within the purview of consultation. I mean, that's the point thereof. And of course, as Councillor Ferry said, there's planning consultation as well. So I mean, I think it's fair to say, I mean, it's not for me to speak for your bidders, but I think their track record is such that they are keen to do this and take it very seriously.
And Sarah, if I may, this is, you know, it's a 12, 15 year plus programme of work. You know, it's not over and done within 12 to 18 months. You know, it's a long-term development, a long-term relationship, and it's important to get that right with the local community in the first instance, but recognise that will evolve and develop over that period of time. We're creating something significant and special on Poets Corner, and it needs time to invest in the local community, in the local neighbourhood, and equally then as you reach across into Wheelsden and the first phase of Byron Quarter, and we would hope subsequent phases to follow as per the original thinking. You know, all of those will need to have strong and positive engagement and involvement to the local communities.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Right, Candy.
Okay, so Chair, just a quick question to officers. In terms of affordable housing, I just wanted to kind of understand, does that mean the housing will only be affordable because the council will buy back those properties, or is there some other established system of someone taking over that housing? If you could just get clarification on that, please. Thank you.
Okay, so the way this works is, first of all, no, it will be affordable, whatever. The commitment is for it to be developed at London affordable rent, and that will apply whoever ultimately owns it. Where the process of ownership is concerned, it is the council's ambition to own these, as I understand it, and the council will certainly have the first option to do that. But if the council chooses for whatever reason not to do so, that will not detract from the affordability or otherwise of the product.
Right. So just to understand, so if the council buys them back, then obviously our figures will be different, I suppose, in terms of the projections right now that we're looking at, because we're looking at the scenario where everything is sold and, you know, costs are covered and there might be something left. But if the council exercises its options, then that might be a different scenario. Is that correct assumption there, Julian?
Yes, I mean, if the council, well, I mean, it depends to some extent on how the council chooses to do it, yes. But the figures that are before you now are based on the production by the partnership of affordable housing. If the council chooses to purchase at some future time, then that is a financial impact on the council. Probably best to bring Dawn in there.
And I know Kimberly wants to come in as well, but I'll bring Dawn and then Kimberly. Dawn, you're on mute.
Dawn, still on mute. Sorry. Just to add to what Julian said, if the council wishes to purchase the affordable units from the development partnership, that wouldn't affect the numbers that are presented in the financial models at the moment. That would be an issue for the council to look at its own model to say, well, if the authority pays X amount for the affordable housing, how will the authority fund that, and how will that funding be covered, for example, by the rents that are coming in? So it will be separate to the numbers that are included in the models that you have in your papers.
Okay, thanks, Dawn.
Kimberly, did you want to come in here? You had your hand up. Not
just
anymore.
a very minor point around the affordable. Like any other planning application, this will obviously be secured through a legally binding 106 agreement with the LLP and the planning authority. So in terms of your point around how this will all be secured and how that would work, just like any other entity putting in for planning.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think the option, so I'm going to abuse my position as chair, come in a bit. Yeah, I think the option of the council buying it would be incredibly exciting. I think moving this affordable not into a registered provider but into the council's HRA would be an incredibly great step. We've got a small HRA, a relatively small compared to London, and I hope, I know Keith is listening and we'll take this back to cabinet. I do hope the administration considers buying this and putting it into the HRA. I think that's really positive. But in terms of this area, I can't see any more hands up. Oh, Keith has now put his hand up, so let's bring Keith in, as I named him.
No, as always, Patty, I agree with you about affordable housing. But as Julian pointed out, this is a long process, and we've no idea that once we've completed these construction of these units, what the market will be like. And at that stage, it may well be that we decide that we sell all of them to a registered provider, or we buy all of them ourselves, or we buy half of them ourselves and rent the rest out at a commercial rent, or we rent them out at a London living wage rent, whatever it is then. I think we need the flexibility in order to be able to decide how these things are going to be done when the market conditions dictate how is the best form of tenancy or sale. But I mean, going just to sum up on this affordability business, we've produced a model which says that we're going to put housing on 2 sites and a new civic centre on another site of a certain size, and that we want this housing to have at least 40% affordable units, and that's the basis that we've been doing all of our modelling on for the past 2 or 3 years. Now there are various parameters. There's the cost of construction, there's the quality of the buildings, there's the as Chris said, a profit at the end of the day. There's the percentage of affordable housing, and usually as a rule it's stated that every unit, every dwelling that you sell at affordable housing or rent levels costs the entity that is constructing that project somewhere in the order of £50,000 to £100,000 per dwelling. So if you wanted to make a profit to keep Councillor Moat happy, you would have to probably drop the amount of affordable housing you've got. If we wanted to increase the amount of affordable housing, it may be that we would have to increase the density on the 2 housing sites. So there's an awful lot of parameters that change around, and once you move one slider one direction, another slider goes in an opposite direction.
Absolutely. All right, Stephen, and they will be the last on this topic before we move on, because we are running over time.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I just wanted to get a little bit of clarity as to what we're talking about, because when I asked earlier about profit making and all that, one of the answers that came back was that we were creating sort of this affordable housing as a public asset, and it would be part of our profit. And that would suggest that new housing would be in the council's ownership. Is it? Can I just double check if it's if by default it will be the case that this housing will be in the council's ownership, or will that affordable housing be in somebody else's ownership?
So I think two things. If I answer what I said to you earlier, you are still creating a public asset, whoever owns it, and that affordable housing is still a cost to the scheme and a benefit to the land asset coming out, because at the end of the day, it costs money to produce, and it's a public asset that can be let to people in affordability, and you've chosen to produce affordable housing through your joint venture. When it is developed by the joint venture, you effectively own half of it because it's in the vehicle. Somebody has to pay the vehicle to own it in the long term, because the way you're setting this up, the HSTP is not intended to be a long-term housing holder. Others have done that, but this isn't. Therefore, somebody has to pay in to get it. Now, as Dawn said, this is actually no different from any other affordable housing. You have to raise the money to buy it, which is why I mentioned it would be a cost to the council if you chose to buy it. But obviously the rental stream pays that back over the business plan period, typically the 30 years. So that's how the affordable housing model works. To specifically answer your last point, Stephen, there is no default. At the time that the affordable housing is built and available, the council has what is effectively the first option to purchase, and if it doesn't take that, then the HSDP will make its own arrangements, and obviously, as you say, that would probably be a registered provider at that point. But there is no default mechanism at this point.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, I can't see any other hands up, so I'm going to move on to the next area, which is risk management planning strategy. I'm going to bring Dan in.
Thanks, Chair. This is just a question about the economic environment we find ourselves in at the moment. We've had representation to this committee in the past that cited economic uncertainty over the last few years, specifically around construction costs and property prices as a reason as to why this project has been delayed. Given the market uncertainty in the wake of COVID-19, which really started during this process, and the potential impact that could have on impacting timescales, the property market, etc., why is this economic uncertainty different? And why should the council be moving forward at this point with the joint partnership? What additional financial risks would this potentially put on the council? I know we've talked about the uncertainty and the length of time of this project, but if you could expand on the information in section 2 of the papers and the earlier response to Canty's question around it being beneficial to be locked in with a partner to face this uncertainty together, any clarity on that would be appreciated.
Thank you. So if I start and then bring Ishdeep and Kim in. So I think the first thing to say is that I don't know what's been made representation to you in the past, so forgive me if I in any way contradict what that's been said, but I'll give you what is my understanding and colleagues' understanding. I mean, the first thing to say is that, as it does say in the paper, we consider all the options. And so we do review, and hence the recommendations to continue, because to discontinue at this point doesn't actually gain you anything, because you would come out of this particular process. You'd almost certainly have to start a similar process again. You'd go through it, you'd expend your costs, and you would get to a position where you may or you may not have more market certainty at that point. But what is absolutely certain is that over the life of this partnership, market conditions will change, and they will change a number of times. Yes, because of COVID, things have changed and become more uncertain at this point in time. And it's for that reason that I say the strength of having a preferred bidder is so you can discuss how the market has changed, discuss what needs to be done, what refinements under the procurement regulations need to be made to the business plan, and then you can have that discussions. It's worth reminding you, you are not locked in until such time as you actually establish the partner, make a contract award, and set up the partnership, and that of course isn't currently scheduled to be in the new year. And that's the point. You've now got this what I would probably describe as a priceless opportunity to engage and to do that. It's probably also worth reminding ourselves that you know, from this moment, you know, even your earliest housing is a couple of years before it'll actually have diggers digging holes in the ground and spades. And so those market conditions that are certainly a little bit uncertain at the moment, although I have to say, and I'll bring Ishdeep in to comment on this in a moment, not universally gloomy, it must be said, but they're certainly uncertain. Sorry, that's a terrible use of words. They are definitely uncertain, but they will potentially have changed and changed again by the time you've actually come to let these or sell these or whichever. Ishdeep, costs and build costs and the like.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. I'll let Kim kind of talk about the current market sentiment in terms of, you know, where we're seeing costs and how costs have kind of been moving over the last few years. But what I will touch upon is, in particular, while COVID has happened, as Julian said, and Paul said, this is a long-term development process, and inevitably we will go through a number of market cycles. It just happens that COVID has kind of hit at this particular time. As part of the procurement process, what we had asked every bidder to do was to provide sensitivity analysis as part of their base financial proposition as to what impact movements in costs and values would have on their propositions. And the key things that we were trying to ascertain from that sensitivity analysis was whether these sites can still be delivered, i.e. they are still viable to be delivered. Both bidders have demonstrated through this process that deliverability is still achieved, cost neutrality can still be achieved, and without going into the detail of how those particular bids change until part 2, obviously they will have impact on certain variables, for example, affordable housing. But what we were trying to test is that the council will still be able to deliver these sites regardless of certain movements in costs and value. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. Secondly, is to set out that, again, as the business plan process is established, that's the point in terms of when the council chooses to invest. So even now, while we are going to be signing off a business plan for contractual close in the coming months, throughout the JV's life, there will be updated appraisals, viabilities testing that's going on. And so you are trying to limit your exposure at each point in time by making those decisions as a JV partner, whether you want to continue to invest in this project. And obviously, as a partner, you have the ability to have that conversation to say whether that should proceed in its current form or not. And, you know, Julian said you're not locked into any of this until contractual close. You know, I'd go further and say, actually, as a partner, you're not locked into spending any more money than you choose to. There is always a nuclear option to walk away through the legal provisions that are in place. So, you know, obviously that would be a nuclear option, and there'd be a number of ramifications of doing so. But you know, as a partner, you still have the ability to do that. But obviously, risk management is an integral part of the JV's processes. We've asked bidders to put forward risk mitigation processes for different types of risks, not just financial ones. But you know, it's an uncertain market. Things will continuously change, and as a JV partner, you will be front and centre of monitoring those. Kim, I don't know if it's worth you coming on and just talking about current market positions.
Yeah, I suppose there's a few things to add really. In terms of the preferred bidder, they still remain extremely committed to this as an opportunity. We've had discussions with, I should say, all bidders, and the two remaining bidder A and bidder B are both still very committed to this. Their view being that actually now is the period when you will be investing in the planning piece and also investing in the sort of longer term business strategy, and actually the point at which you will be trying to sell private units to sort of maximise value. You will be in quite a different point than where we are at the moment in terms of the current climate. So I think that's one point to note. I think the other bit that I just wanted to flag in terms of the sort of nuclear type option as Ishdeep talked through it, really standing back and looking, lots of public commitments were made around delivery of a new Civic. You're sat on a large plot of land in a dilapidated building, which has the capacity to deliver huge numbers of housing, both private and affordable. Going down the route and saying, well, actually, we're not comfortable committing to a JV at this juncture. I suppose, where does that take you in terms of other options? Because the option for self-delivery was considered in detail and discarded. Concerns over your financial ability as a council to meet, various commitments. I'd be very surprised if Dawn said, well, actually, we've suddenly got a huge amount of money that enables us to do this all on our own. And your risk point is highlighted if you're just the only one doing that delivery piece yourself. And equally, I think it's unlikely you would want to go down the route of ceding all of your control and just selling off these sites on a piecemeal basis to a developer, where you're going to have less control over driving up the affordability point and also delivering the Civic that you need. So I suppose my point really is I think the sort of LLP type route, irrespective of where the market is the best option available to you in terms of balancing those objectives. And given that you're committing yourselves to a long-term partnership, it's set up with those checks and balances that it should be able to withstand different cycles within the market, of which we are at a point in one of them. And there will be a number of other different points and different cycles you'll need to go through with this partner. So I think they were the only bits I really wanted to flag. Great, thank you. Dawn, of course, is famous for finding random pots of money, but probably not anywhere near as much as is needed for this. Dan, did that answer your questions? Yeah. Okay, I can see that Keith wants to come in, and then I'm going to bring in Stephen.
Yes, and then I just wanted to say that yeah, when we're dealing with the risks, I mean, there are risks in any form of development proposal. Commercial development relies on purchasing a site and then putting up a building and then selling it at a profit. And of course, the cost of buying the site can be anything up to about a third of the cost of the eventual cost of the project. And a commercial developer will be paying interest on the finance that he has needed to raise to buy the site. We're not constrained in that way quite so much, although we're still having to pay for the site and not having to pay somebody for the purchase of the site. So in that respect, we've got quite an advantage. And I think wherever you start doing development projects, if you're forced into selling in order to make sure that you're keeping your costs down and to build it as fast as possible, then you're constrained into the market that obtains when you come to the point of sale. There's three main risks in any form of property development. That is the cost of construction, the value of the project once it's completed and whether it can be sold at a profit or a loss, and of course the overwhelming economic position of the country that you're developing in at the time. And all of these things can be worked out. What we can't do is to see into the future, but we can have mechanisms to control the effect of the future on our particular development to a certain extent. And I think it is more important to say that we're aware of all of these risks and what can happen should these risks arrive, and we can't mitigate them, rather than to say, or perhaps somebody could advise me exactly what the retail property market will be like in 15 years' time. Because if they can tell me that, private message me, because we're going to become billionaires.
Absolutely. Well, if and me as well, no doubt. But Stephen.
Thank you very much, Chairman. In terms of risk, it's quite clear, even in the Part 1 papers, particularly pages 25 to 26, there's some quite intricate sequencing of financial returns required in order to reduce borrowing, particularly with bidder B's funding strategy, which relies on early receipts to reduce borrowing. Now, what sort of risks are there that these receipts won't materialise in the way and the timing that we might need them to, in order to fit in with this strategy? And is there not a significant risk, particularly in current circumstances, that if this sequencing doesn't happen right, that our interest payments could end up ballooning?
Sashi, I think Dawn could come in on that one.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. I mean, you're correct, Councillor, is that at the moment the model base is based on timing of receipts, of capital receipts, and some of those timings there will always be delays to some of those timing to those receipts. Some might even come in early. I think you make a very valid point. As we go through the process of the bid, so this is what we're presenting to you here, is what's based on the model. As we go through the business cases, is very much at the forefront of our thinking, and how we manage that and how we manage that risk. I think, just to reiterate the point, that at the moment the model does show that we are going to get some returns from the JV on top of the capital receipts. It's actually mentioned in the paragraph to the main report. So we're looking at in the region of, during the development, about 7 million or so. And I think it'd be very wise for the council that any of those returns that we do get in, we hold that as some form of contingency for us, so that if we do have some of these timing differences, then we have got the financial resource to manage that. But I think this is something that is going to have to be managed very, very carefully as we go through this process, to make sure that those delays are minimised, to minimise the impact for the council.
Thank you very much for that. Just to sort of progress from that, really. The other thing that's notable is that obviously a lot of the financial success of this relies on the land value and getting a good assessment of the land value. And obviously, I think it looks like that's going to be the final assessment of that will be obviously once we draw that down and start building on the land. But if we get the timing of that wrong, is there not a risk that we could end up, particularly again in the current financial circumstances, end up effectively letting our land go at a lower value than we would otherwise get for it, and effectively having the same problem as selling off our gold reserves at the lower point of the market? Is there a risk of that? And we've got this once in we've got one opportunity to get a good value for our land, and are we, in proceeding at this point, are we at significant risk of having our land undervalued effectively?
I think I'll ask Ishti to come in, if that's okay, about the land value, Ishdeep?
Yeah, of course. So, no, I mean, Stephen, you're absolutely right. Obviously, you know, we're at a point in time, and the land value will be based on the business plan at the point of drawdown, in bidder, in the preferred bidder's case. And you know, it depends on where the market cycle is at that point. But as I think, you know, people have alluded to on this meeting already, it's crystal ball gazing to know whether the market is going to improve, whether it's going to go down, and you know, we have to make a best forecast in terms of where we are. I just wanted to also just touch on the point around the timing of the receipts to fund H&C. Absolutely, I mean, you know, fundamentally the proposition would change for the bidder who has proposed that if receipts came in at a different time. But obviously, don't forget, you are in control of when you start and complete the Harrow New Civic. So if things preceding that, so the development that was planned was not going on time, had been delayed, or you were, you know, not seeing the values transpire, you would have the ability to either delay things to try and mitigate that risk, or, you know, consider other mitigations where appropriate. But again, it's the critical part here is you are a partner within the HSDP, and controlling the pace of delivery as part of that will be completely part of your remit as a member. So, you know, you do have a number of controls on there. Absolutely, that is a big risk, and as Dawn said, that will be under continuous monitoring.
Julian, you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Chair, thank you. Ishdeep's more or less made my point. Right. But just to say, of course, none of the other alternatives would remove that risk. They would apply with disposal, development agreement, and with all the others. And of course, as Ishdeep's just taken me on into, the fact that you have got this control gives you a better defence to it in this vehicle than it would do in the others. That was all I was going to add.
But with respect, wouldn't waiting till we know more of what's going on, would that not potentially be a better option in that particular set to deal with that particular set of issues?
Well, that takes you back to the issues where we started with in my first remarks to this, which is if you know that you're going to get market certainty, well, maybe, but how do you know you are? And secondly, you will then have incurred another round of costs, whereas here you have the opportunity to take it forward with a developer who you have already put through a procurement process.
And potentially end up with further sunk costs down the line if we end up not wanting to, because you keep saying, you know, we're not committed right now. Once we appoint the preferred bidder, if we get to the point where, you know, we've appointed a preferred bidder and then we decide at a later point to pull out, we will have sunk further costs in, and the argument you're making now will have even more strength to it.
Well, I mean, that is true. I mean, you clearly will be putting further costs in, of that there's no doubt. Crudely, what you're going to put in over the next few months will be less than you put in thus far. But yes, I mean, that is true.
I see Keith, I probably want to come in on that point, then Kimberly, and then I'm going to move on.
Yeah, I just want to make the point that as it's presently configured, we've got about 20 blocks of flats over the two housing sites. And if the property market did take a sharp drop, then what you would do is to just stop building one flat after another. You're not building one building where you've got to worry about what the property price is like in 2 years' time. We're building 20 blocks of flats over 20 years. So if the property price goes up, then the rate of building goes up. If the property price goes down, the number of blocks of flats that you're building goes down.
Well, I mean, I would argue, as I normally do, that if the property price goes down, we shouldn't stop building. We should build even more and put all 2,000 of our people on the housing waiting list and turn them all affordable. But that will be an option, no doubt, that politically we could take. Kimberly.
it was just really to flag that we're not committing to a price for the sites at this point in time. There is a mechanism which is linked into market value, has a clear set of assumptions within that, and that calculation is only done at the point that all of your pre-drawdown conditions are achieved. So you're not saying actually we're in a poor market at the moment and this is the point at which we're determining a price for all of our land. Reality is that valuation is probably likely to be done in about, year and a half, 2 years time, when you've actually started to get that planning piece in place.
Okay. I can't see any hands up, so I'm going to move on to the next area, COVID-19 inequality. And I want to bring Sarah. I know Sarah wanted to talk on this point, so I'll bring Sarah in to start with.
Thank you. It was really just a question, beyond the timeline being disrupted by COVID, have there been any other impacts of COVID-19 upon this process? And is there anything we can do to at least try to be kind of future-proof for a second spike or something else, the pandemic continuing?
Who wants to do it? Julian?
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of the wider equalities point, then obviously in terms of this decision today, as the report says, there are no specific equalities implications. We will be bringing back an assessment on a site-by-site basis and an overall basis at the point of contract close, which will assess all of those things. And no doubt, if COVID is still with us, and sadly it probably will be, it will take the COVID aspects into account at that point. In terms of the procurement process, and as you say, yes, it was delayed. Much of what is to come can be done remotely as we are today. Much of the negotiations can continue to be conducted, and therefore we can continue to move forward. There are some bits that are certainly done better face to face, and we would certainly try and do those, but obviously we've all moved on a great deal from the point at which we paused the process back in April. So I'd hesitate to give you a guarantee that we were future-proofed, but we are certainly more robust than we were. I think in terms of the other point, will COVID affect what is happening out there? Well, I think it might help reshape some of the social value activities. The bidders, as part of their submission, submitted a session on social value and made various commitments as to what they do. And certainly in light of the changed world and the changed parameters, they will be keen, no doubt, to work with you to actually reshape those in the context of the modern world. And I guess there are other aspects of design and development that may change as a result. To be honest, that's probably going to be a moving feast, depending on how long and what the effects of the virus are in the long term. Certainly there will be impacts on the new civic centre design, as there are currently on the forward drive design, but in terms of this model that is before you for the purpose of the procurement, we don't get down to the sort of levels of opening doors and disinfectant surfaces and all the rest of it. The costings at this point are too broad for that, but obviously that would be taken into account in more detailed costings further down the line. I think that's probably about covered it, but I'm happy to be added by anybody who thinks I've missed anything.
No.
Okay, Sarah, did you have any follow-up to that?
No, Julian, thanks very much for that. I think there's a lot of unexpected things as well, isn't there? So there's only so much that we can plan for, but thank you.
Okay, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. Slightly going on from where Sarah was there, one of the things with COVID that's coming up and it's related to children is we've lost the ability, and I know partly moving some of the children's services into forward drive, that's in the future, but we've lost the ability to protect children by face-to-face meetings as opposed to team meetings. And I'm just wondering how we're going to build that in, because it's got to be COVID proof. It's got to have face-to-face meetings with children, because if we don't do this correctly, we will be breaking the law in protecting children. And that's my concern, that we've got to get that right planning, and COVID is going to cause the problems. It will change with the new civic, but I just wonder how we're going to think about that, because it is a massive problem. Children's needs have gone up because of COVID and lockdown. We're getting more and more children put into care. We've got a lot more social work to do, and they have to be face-to-face meetings. We haven't really looked yet at how we're going to plan all that in, and I just wonder what effect that will have on us.
In fact, I'll start that one and Julie can pick it up. I think, to be fair, Chris, and I seem to remember this question coming to us once before about how we're going to use our facilities at Forward Drive and how we allow access for those safeguarding meetings, etc. You know, that's why we're looking at using our existing neighbourhood resource centre, our children's centres, and our existing network of council facilities, together with those facilities which the CCG are operating from, to use those facilities as the places where we can continue to have those face-to-face conversations. And that's almost our immediate step, and we build in that learning into the design and layout for the new civic centre. So that is the place where, you know, community will come and where they'll access those services. So it's very much to the fore as to how we might provide those services, and you would expect both Paul Hewitt and Councillor Mrs Robson are really keen that that's at the forefront of the design and layout of those facilities.
I say thank you for that, but I'll keep asking the question.
No, it's fine.
When it's going to happen, because it's the protection of children is the key thing. Thank you.
Okay.
Stephen.
Thank you very much, Chairman. All the bid documents, the final bid documents were submitted in March pre-COVID. To what extent, and obviously they've you know, all the scoring and the assessment of the preferred bidders has been to a large extent based on that. To what extent are these bids now you know, out of date, and all the assumptions that have been made in them? To what extent, you know, have these scorings been made on current information?
Well, the first thing to say is they are not out of date in the sense that they will form the basis on which we will start the refinements that we're permitted to then do thereafter, and so they will be the core on which everything else follows. Now, for all the reasons that we've discussed, and from the march of time, and bear in mind, even pre-COVID, there would have been some adjustments between now and contract close. They will move on. But I mean, to be honest with you, and I'll bring Kim in to add anything. For me, Stephen, this is just another illustration why we need to appoint a preferred bidder to have the discussion, and then they can then say what they think needs to tweak and what doesn't as a result of the events of the last few months. So this is your starting point. Yes, there will be some refinements, but this is the core. This is the foundation. Kim, did you want to add?
Yeah, no problem. I think the main points really are going to be costs and values. I mean, the sort of strategy and the qualitative bit would, you know, there's no reason why that wouldn't stand. I suppose on the cost perspective, it's really what additional measures are needed on building sites to meet the current COVID type requirements, and that is a completely moving feast. I think it's also important to flag Brexit seems to have completely gone off the agenda, but arguably is going nowhere come December, so that will have implications in terms of workforce, where that is coming from, and how that resource is met in terms of what those sorts of agreements look like. So, you know, I think it's very fair to say that that cost piece will move and will be refined. Equally, the actual schemes that were put forward, as we've discussed in some detail, they are not consulted on schemes. They're schemes that have been discussed in detail with Bev and her team from a planning perspective, but they don't have the benefit of community engagement behind them. So I think it's fair to say those schemes will be amended as you go through the planning process with your partner. I think in terms of the value point, there was a real issue with actually getting any sales data through for probably from March through to June time, because nobody was able to actually complete on homes. And the sort of sales data that you're getting through is, you know, arguably now to a degree being propped up by the stamp duty holiday that you're getting through to March. So it's quite difficult to actually see the shape of the housing market recovery and what long-term impact it's really going to have on places like Harrow. And I think the other point to add on that is, you know, there's lots of discussions regarding non-residential space and what form that will take, and I don't think anybody has the answer on that point, be that office or retail, both of which were components of all bidders' submissions. So I think those are probably the main reflections in terms of where the market is, but I don't think they're points anybody has a particular answer on at this juncture, definitively.
Great, thank you very much. I don't see any more hands up, so we've got the final area, which is kind of a catch-all before we move into part two. If there is anything, bear in mind the time, I can't see anyone. If there are any questions from Harrow Youth Parliament or our co-op members, please let us know now. Unmute yourself if you can't use the chat function or the hands up. Otherwise, I'm going to Stephen in for a question.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just wondering, you know, this has been talked about for quite, you know, over many months and years actually, that you know, there needs to be a sort of a thorough understanding across all these sites of the car parking needs and a whole, you know, a whole strategy. And obviously this is, it's more urgent, you know, with putting together the partnership. And I you know, we've been told it's been worked on, but I'm just wondering at what point, you know, will we be able to see this assessment of overall car parking provision, and will that be available, you know, if the preferred bidder stage is proceeded to, will that assessment be available before the final partnership partnership agreement is signed off?
So I think the simple answer to that is yes. I think it is an important piece of work that, as we say, we have embarked on, but not yet finished. I think fortuitously, of course, we can now talk to the bidder about that and engage on them in it. So yes, there should be a draft strategic document, and that would undoubtedly need to be agreed, partly because it will contribute to the business plan. I think it's probably, I know planning colleagues would kick me under the metaphorical table if I didn't say that, but of course, you know, there is a particular planning policy, and I mean, that is going to end up having to be the starting point of that, there is no doubt. But yes, in answer to your question, yeah, we'll be certainly bringing that forward over the course of the autumn.
Thank you very much, and just another quick issue as well. I think there's obviously in Harrow, and probably even more so in going into the future, there's going to be a significant need for family-sized homes. So how you know, working with whoever the preferred bidder is, how would you make sure that the homes that are being built actually meet the needs of the borough?
Well, as we said earlier, Stephen, the information on which they are basing is based on the council's current policy, and will obviously be monitored against that, both in terms of housing needs and planning policy, looking forward. And obviously, as that changes, so we'll be looking to work with the bidder to reflect that.
I mean, when you say within planning policy, I mean, there isn't anything in planning policy that would prevent us from building more larger homes. Obviously, you'd also be correct in saying that there isn't anything in planning policy that would prevent us from building smaller homes. So there's an element of discretion here, and there's also an element of working out what are needs are going to be in the future. And obviously with, you know, if more people end up working from home, then larger homes are going to be needed. So I just want to make sure that that is, you know, if obviously we talked about lots and lots about building flats, I just want to make sure that that we're not forgetting, you know, when we're building all these homes, that the needs of building homes for families.
No, absolutely. No, I mean, you're right about that element of discretion, but of course you do have your various studies that go to inform decision making and inform your housing needs and all the rest of it. And obviously you will update those going forward, and they will continue to be the yardstick by which you're measured. But no, absolutely, Harrow's Housing Need, you know, this is your partner and your partnership. So Harrow's Housing Need, we're very much borne in mind by them.
Thank you.
I think that took us all the way to the end of the meeting to get Brexit and parking discussed, which is unusual for Harrow, but there we are. I think that's coming to the end of our part one discussion. I just want to give anyone else an opportunity to contribute if they want. No. Okay. In terms of, we're about to move into part two, and there, for members, there is a separate invite you need to use to go into that, and that will allow us to have a bit more of a discussion. There are no part two minutes, there are only part 1 minute. So in terms of the discussion today, I think it's too broad for me to sum up, but Daxia has been taking minutes, and that will be submitted to Cabinet as a reference. And of course, Keith has been listening to the whole discussion and will continue to listen through the part two, and we'll be able to share with Cabinet any comments that he thinks need to hear. So can I thank everyone for attending this part? Can I thank Co-op members, Harrow Youth Parliament and others? Very sorry that we can't include you in the part two, but due to the confidential nature of the papers, the second part will only be for councillors and officers. So thank you very much. Can I now move us into part two?